Giants. You know them, you love them. From folklore to fantasy, these colossal figures have always loomed large in our imaginations, whether it's the fearsome giants of ancient myths or the towering titans of modern fantasy. Their immense size and overwhelming strength have captivated humanity for generations. And let's not forget the real-life giants we see today. NBA players dominating the court with their incredible height and reach, or massive wrestlers towering over their opponents, bringing their larger-than-life presence to the squared circle. Giants, whether in storybooks or sports, have always been a symbol of power, mystery, and the extraordinary. But what if I told you there was a time, not so long ago, where an entire army of giants marched in real life? Today, we're diving into the fascinating and downright bizarre story of the Potsdam Giants, a regiment of colossal soldiers created by a Prussian king with a towering obsession. Now get ready to take a giant step into history, because this story stands head and shoulders above the rest. Ever heard of a Napoleon complex? Well, let me introduce you to Frederick William I, the King of Prussia from 1713 to 1740. This portly little monarch stood a mere 4 foot 10 inches tall, basically the exact opposite of a giant. But the tiny king had a rather unique approach to elevating his stature. While some might have acquired a fine pair of boots, or perhaps even taken up horseback riding to elevate their status, Frederick, though, had a very different idea. He was convinced that bigger meant better, and if he himself couldn't be large and in charge, he'd at least surround himself with the tallest, burliest, most imposing group of soldiers the world had ever seen. Somewhat fittingly, Frederick William I was also known as the Soldier King. He was obsessed with his military. Upon taking the throne, he immediately set about doubling the size of his army, from 38,000 to a formidable 83,000 standing troops. But that wasn't enough. He had a very specific vision for a very special regiment, a regiment of extraordinarily tall and large soldiers. Thus, the Grand Grenadiers of Potsdam, better known as the Potsdam Giants, were born. At the time in 18th century Europe, the average height for a man was about 5 feet 6 inches. Frederick, though, had no interest in average. He set a minimum height requirement of 5 feet 11 inches for his new regiment. This height might not raise eyebrows today, but back then it was quite literally head and shoulders above the rest. A Potsdam Giant's salary was dependent on his height. The taller, the better you were paid. These soldiers were adorned in regal blue and topped with a 45-centimeter grenadier cap that added to their towering stature. The king's quest for height led him to extraordinary lengths. He sent out scouts across Europe, scouring the lands for especially tall men. Offers of large sums of money were made to families with particularly towering sons, and entire diplomatic negotiations sometimes hinged on the exchange of tall soldiers. Neighboring nations, eager to stay on Frederick's good side, would often gift their tallest citizens to the Prussian king, sometimes against the will of the men involved. Frederick was notoriously frugal, but when it came to large men, he spared no expense, dedicating enormous amounts of money to recruiting giants. The king's odd hobby quickly became well known across Europe, driving up the prices of giants. And if they couldn't be bought, Frederick's methods became even more dubious. Stories abound of Irish longshoremen being kidnapped, Austrian diplomats being snatched off the streets, and men simply disappearing, spirited away to serve as giants in the king's bizarre regiment. In fact, the Potsdam Giants' tallest soldier, James Kirkland, an Irishman standing at the staggering height of 7 feet 2 inches, was himself kidnapped and forced into the unit. How on earth they kidnapped him is a mystery to me. One medical historian even noted that the Potsdam Giants were the tallest men ever assembled on Earth until the birth of professional basketball. Now you might be thinking surely these giants were fierce warriors, hand-picked for battle, but you'd be mistaken. Many of them were mentally disabled, or somewhat mentally handicapped as a result of their giantism. The Potsdam Giants were less of a fighting force and more of a spectacle. Even if they were able to fight, a lot of them would not have wanted to. Living conditions in their camp were atrocious. Forced conscription, food and shelter shortages were common, and more than 200 of the giants mutinied every year. The ones who were caught after they escaped had their noses cut off before being thrown into jail for desertion. The towering soldiers were treated almost like circus performers, paraded before visiting dignitaries, or made to march up and down to entertain the king himself. Sometimes, Frederick would even have them painted from memory, capturing their immense stature on canvas for his own amusement. Frederick's obsession for his giant soldiers can be summed up in a single sentence that he once said to a French ambassador: "The most beautiful girl or woman in the world would be a matter of indifference to me, but my tall soldiers, they are my weakness." Frederick's obsession with height didn't stop with recruitment. He believed taller was always better, and he wanted even taller soldiers. This led to a series of grim experiments. The king had his soldiers subjected to stretching sessions, where they were placed on racks in an attempt to literally stretch them taller. Would hate to be on the shorter end of the giants. Predictably, this ended disastrously, with more than a few unfortunate deaths. The king, however, seemed undeterred, later abandoning the practice only because it wasn't as effective as he hoped. In a bizarre twist, Frederick even tried his hand at a bit of selective breeding. He would marry his tallest soldiers to the tallest women in nearby villages, hoping their offspring would inherit their height. Very similarly to how China recruited its tallest man and woman to create Yao Ming. The king's fixation with creating a race of giants began to border on the fanatical. This particularly bizarre saga in history came to an end with Frederick's death in 1740. His son, Frederick the Great, had little interest in his father's giant regiment. A sickly child who had a strained relationship with his father, Frederick the Great saw the regiment as a financial drain rather than a source of military might. One of his first acts as king was to disband the Potsdam Giants, scattering its members across the more standard military units, while others returned home. And so, this odd chapter of military history came to a close. And according to one biography of Frederick the Great, when the Giants were released, the roads to Paris were littered with half-wits trying to find their way back home. And with that, the grand dream of an army of giants faded into obscurity, leaving behind a tale that still captures the imagination today. A story of ambition, obsession, and just a bit of madness. Alright, so that's going to do it for this one. Go ahead and comment with your favorite giant of all time. A lot of great giants in history and fantasy, so go ahead and drop your favorite giant. I think I'm a classic Goliath guy, but if I had to pick a real-life giant, I always liked the Big Show as a kid. He was one of my favorite wrestlers. Just a massive guy. I loved his choke slam. So yeah, comment with your favorite giant. Go ahead and like, subscribe, and have a great day.